such an important conversation. I'm glad that we're able to have it today. And hopefully it's the first of many dialogues that WEOP is going to host around the topic of mental health. I have the pleasure of introducing two very exceptional women who are doing extraordinary work in the field of mental health. I will read these bios. These are some serious bios, but I'm gonna read them. So we'll start with Dr. Sherry Blake. She's a speaker, author, and mental health specialist. Dr. Blake is a licensed clinical psychologist with over 30 years and over 100,000 hours. Y'all don't know what that means, but 100,000 hours of direct and indirect service. She earned both her Master of Science and her Doctor of Philosophy in psychology from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. She has served on numerous boards of directors and as the former president of the Metro Atlanta Mental Health Association. Dr. Sherry has been featured on numerous other networks, radio and print media, including CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, and HLN, and Bravo. She has also authored two books, The Single Married Woman, and her latest, Care for the Caregiver, Surviving the Emotional Roller Coaster. Much of her work focuses on empowering women to eliminate emotional barriers in order to achieve their goals. She is dedicated to reducing mental health stigma and increasing mental health awareness, especially in the African American and other underserved communities. Welcome, Dr. Sherry. We also have Shanti Doss, Miss Shanti Doss, who is an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and founder of Silence the Shame. Shanti Doss is an entertainment industry veteran, speaker, author, and philanthropist. Shanti worked in the entertainment business for over 25 years. Her music industry career from intern to executive vice president included positions at Capitol Records, LaFace Records, Columbia Records, Sony, Urban Music, and Universal Motown, where she worked directly with some of music's top talent like Outkast, Usher, Prince, TLC, Toni Braxton, Erykah Badu, and more. As a result of Shanti's extensive community work, she decided to establish her own nonprofit, the Hip Hop Professional Foundation Incorporated. Didn't know that. Rebranded under the name Silence the Shame Incorporated. Shanti's foundation curates community conversations, creates content, and broadens awareness and education around mental health and wellness. In addition to running her nonprofit, Shanti speaks at companies, universities, sharing her inspiring message of mental health awareness and also curating webinars around mental wellness. Both of you are so impressive. I'd like to, yes, please. I'd like to start by asking what led you on your path, what in your life path led you to mental health, to your roles in mental health?
So first, can you hear me? First, I'll just say, like, Dr. Blake she is a true gem. So to have her and to be up here with her, she was supportive of our organization from day one, and we haven't seen each other in a while, but her bio speaks for itself, but she truly is a gem to our community. So just thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
And thank you, WEOP, for having me. So I think I should probably start by saying that my father died by suicide when I was 7 months old. And my father actually was Indian. My mom's Black. She passed away in January. But growing up in African-American culture, we didn't deal with it. I was embarrassed. I didn't tell nobody. You know, my sister would say, oh, I didn't tell anybody how dad died till I was in college. And none of us ever talked about it, never went to counseling. And so that's kind of when trauma really reared its ugly head, aside from the 400 years of trauma for our community. But personally, my family started dealing with it then. So I kind of suppressed a lot of my feelings and didn't really talk about it. Fast forward, went to college, graduated from Syracuse. Where's Tanya? Thank you, Tanya, for even allowing me to be here, for connecting me to the wonderful ladies at WEOP. And, you know, started working in the music industry and had a really great career. But the music industry, it is true, it's a tough business. You've probably heard stories about it. It's a very high-paced industry. And once the going got tough, I didn't really know what to do with my feelings, right? We didn't talk about self-care. Wellness wasn't a thing back in the 90s and 2000s. And so some things led to my own challenges with anxiety and depression. I think the first time I ever uttered the words, maybe I should just kill myself, was in 2001. I had just moved to New York City at Arista Records. I was being overlooked for the vice president position. I was in a really toxic work environment. We didn't know to really go to HR. There weren't any real EAP programs or, support, someone like a Dr. Blake, or tell me your name again. Dawn, thank you. And someone like Dawn, to really be able to support us. And so, I went to counseling for the first time, and my sister was like, you got to really deal with Dad's death. You just have to. So long story short, I did for 3 months and kind of jumped back into my career, as we all do. We think we fixed the problem and we're like, okay, I'm done with that. In therapy, you really have to stay at it and work at it. And I did not. So anyway, I ended up walking away from my career, making almost $500,000 a year in 2009, corner office, all of that. I was depressed. I was taking naps at work in the middle of the day. Not like me. Anybody that knew me knows I'm a workaholic. That was just not me. And then I had developed cervical spinal stenosis, where like my whole right side was numb. I couldn't feel anything. It was a direct result of stress. I mean, I was really literally just imploding, and my mom was developing Alzheimer's. So I walked away from it all, came back home, was okay for a few years, just trying to figure out life and what I wanted to do. In 2014, my best friend took her own life, and I came close to taking my own life, really close, in 2015. I can share more, but I want Dr. Blake to be able to share, but that's really, life just happened. And it's funny how it's a full circle moment. Now I'm doing stuff with music and entertainment. God is really good, but it just took me hitting rock bottom, and my friend dying the same way that my dad did was just too much for me.
And I appreciate you more than you'll ever know, because it's hard to share our own stories sometimes. It's really hard to be vulnerable, but you have no idea how much your story will help others, because we never know who we're talking to. We never know that somebody may be in that same boat. So I have known Shanti for a long time. I am very proud of her, and I have watched her organization just boom, because people need help. And people need help. And until we share stories and learn how to share stories, people will be silent. And it's really hard. With me, my story is a little different in that I grew up in a small town USA in Tennessee. I call it small town USA in Tennessee. And everybody knew everybody, but nobody would dare talk about mental health. Nobody would dare mention there's something wrong. And if you saw something or you felt something was wrong with a person, and I was the child, I was a middle child. And as a middle child, I was the person I always got in trouble. You know how I was 5 kids and I was that middle child, and I'd always ask why. Well, why? Well, why? Why did he? And my parents say, oh, he's just like that. Oh, he's different, or she's different, this kind of stuff. So I think that God has a plan for all of us. And sometimes we don't know that plan. We don't even understand, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? But things happen. And I remember I'm a little older than some of you in here. I'm not going to say how old, but with that, my parents had sued for integration way back in the 60s. And I was one of the first I was the first Black child in an all-white school in the 3rd grade. And my thing is, I used to always try to understand people. Like, why are they acting like this? Or why do they not like us? And then I would deal with them in the day. And then I would go home to a Black community, and people go, well, what are they like? Well, what did they say? They had all these questions. So I became sort of a negotiator. But in terms of mental health, it came really home, because mental health has no zip code. Let me just say that. It impacts us all. And there is not one person in here, you may not be aware of it, that we don't have someone in our family, someone we know of that has suffered for mental health. Mental health is your health. And it used to have so much shame, so much guilt, so much stuff, you wouldn't talk about it. And as African Americans, especially, our tendency is to just pray it away or avoid it, or we just don't say anything and it'll go away. And we know that doesn't happen. So my true story in terms of my own family was I had seen things in the community, especially in the church, and I'm in the process of working on a program of mental health in the church because it is so needed with leaders and stuff. But I had a cousin and I was just starting Vanderbilt. You know how when you start grad school, you diagnose everybody, you diagnose everything. You know, well, do I have that? I think you have it. You know, so, but this cousin was very popular and everybody loved him. And he was my sister's age, and my sister's a little older than I am. And so my sister says, something's wrong with him. Something's wrong. And I'm gonna have to change the name because anybody, you know, it's a small world. I'm gonna say Bill. I was somewhere and I almost said his name and I didn't realize my cousin's cousin was in there, and I thought, oh Lord, and then I'll have to hear this forever. You know, she's up there talking about our family, but it is our family. But anyway, Bill started acting funny. And my sister said, something's wrong. You know, something's wrong with him. And I said, what do you mean? Now, remember, I'm in Vanderbilt and I'm studying diagnosis now. Well, and she says, well, he's talking to himself a little bit. He's doing this. So I called his wife. And, you know, I'm the middle child because I'm going to ask all the questions. Why? And so she said, well, you know, now that you mention it, he has disconnected wires in the car. He circles the house. He thinks people. I said, he's paranoid. And now, you know, I'm like maybe second year. So now I feel like I have some solid ground under me. I know what I'm talking about. So I met him and he wanted to meet because we're all real close. And he wanted to meet for lunch one day. And he told me he had something big to tell me. He said, this is big. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. And he kept talking about how big it was. So we get to, I don't know if y'all remember Shoney's. You remember Shoney's? Yes. To Shoney's, that was the meeting place. He had this little box and he was sitting in a booth. He said, see, I got it right here in this, right here. I got it all. And I'm thinking, okay. And so I said, what's in the box? He said, shh. And I'm looking around. Now I can see what other people I hadn't been around him talking. Shh. And so he says, and he opens his box very slowly. And there's nothing in the box, of course. And he went on to tell me about the FBI. He went on to tell me about all these delusions he was having. So now I did as any middle child, second year Vanderbilt student, I wrote up a case study. So I collected all my data. I collected all my information because I said, we need to sit down as a family. You know how you said families don't talk? So I sat down with my aunt and uncle and his sister, and his sister's husband happened to be a minister. And I grew up in the church. So, you know, you just pray everything away. You know, that's it. So I sit down and I had my papers in order. I could, you know, sort of support everything I said because I knew they were going to ask me questions. So I said, something's wrong. What did I say? His name was Bill. Something's wrong with Bill. And they looked at me and I said, well, what do you mean? I says, well, he's sick. And I said, he's sick, not physically sick, but he's mentally sick. He has an emotion. And I expressed what the diagnosis was. And I explained what happens. And these are the characteristics. Haven't you seen that? Well, and you know how people minimize, well, sometimes, but, and so all of a sudden I said, no, he needs help. And as a family, we're going to have to step up and we need to get him help. And have you ever told Black folks they need help in the area? We need to get him help. And I says, because this is what's going to happen. And I laid out what was going to happen if we don't get him help. And they looked at me and I remember I go, really, baby? Oh, no. Really? Yes, this is what's going to happen. And this is the what's happening. Well, let's pray. Yeah, we had to stop everything and pray. So, okay, I believe in prayer. We pray. I said, but we still got to get him help. So now we pray. We still got to get him help. And at this point, they told me, they said, no, you know what? I think he's going to be okay. He's going to be. And I said, no, he's not going to be. Okay. No, he's going to be okay. They dismissed everything, all my hard work, all my scholarly work to make sure I had dismissed it all. And unfortunately, My cousin died. My cousin started going into, he was paranoid schizophrenic. He started walking into crack houses in Nashville area. And one day he almost got shot. And somebody said that, people don't play in those, drug houses. And they went to pull guns and somebody said, wait. That's that crazy kid down the street. Don't, and they called my cousin and said, y'all need to do something about him because he's going to get hurt. They didn't do anything about him. And it was probably about 2-3 years later, he died. And he died, unfortunately, a preventable death because he wouldn't go to the doctor. They couldn't get him help. He was paranoid. He kept getting into conflicts, but his actual death was a diabetic coma. Nobody knew he had diabetes. Nobody knew he was, and because of that, he died. And what was sad is where he died was very tragic because it didn't have to be. And it was in a situation where he was in a paranoid state, a very paranoid state. So I say to you, it does not escape any of us. It is real and we have to deal with it because it doesn't go away. And I'm going to stop because I can go on all day, but I'm going to leave it there to say, not just Shanti's family, but it happens to all of us. And just because we don't talk about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Was able to recognize something similar in my nephew, paranoid schizophrenia, and his mother was in such denial about it until I couldn't use my 1013 capabilities, but I had to go with him to get hospitalized and get treatment. So, likely none of us is dealing with anything that acute in this room, but we need to deal with our own mental health challenges that come up. I think there are key moments in our lives that we'll always remember, like Shanti shared and Dr. Blake shared. One for me is when I was in grad school, I was in my Master of Family Therapy program. And I decided, well, since I think I'm about to be somebody's therapist, maybe I should go to therapy. So I went to therapy. And as soon as I sat down, I kid you not, within 5 minutes, I was bawling. Now, I didn't even know that was in there. I didn't know anything was going on with me. But what I shared with the counselor was, I felt like I was walking around carrying a house of cards. I was a single mother raising a 12-year-old who was very active in volleyball, competitive volleyball, had a business that was going through accreditation. I was in school managing multiple internships and practicum sites. And I felt like at any moment, if I misstepped, it would all come crashing down. And I was concerned about my staff, their families, how they would be devastated, my clients, how they would be devastated, their families, my daughter. I totally neglected myself in that. I didn't care how I would be affected. I cared about how everybody else would be affected. And so I had disowned my own mental health needs, like my own needs for support. And the therapist asked me, she was like, well, why you got to control everything? And I looked at her like, what you talking about? This isn't control what you see. This is just what I have to do. There is no option. So, she's like, why you have to control everything? Why won't you delegate? And, I didn't know what she was talking about until I left. And then I had an epiphany. It was like an aha moment when I realized that I had bought into the Superwoman ideal. Like, we can do everything. We can do it flawlessly, perfectly, with grace and with poise, with a smile on our face and high heels on. And
this is what you did when you watched.
You had to prop me up, so I appreciate you. And then my business partner, she came to the rescue in the restroom with me. So, but yeah, we just have this illusion or we have bought into an illusion that we can do it all unsupported. And that is very dangerous, a very dangerous setup for us because of the implication for our health, not just our mental health, but our physical health, because as our mental health is, our physical health will follow.
Right.
So my question, I guess, for Dr. Sherry and Ms. Shanti, is how have you seen the Superwoman ideal show up in the lives of women you support through your work or even in your own lives?
Well, for me, I was like you, just doing it all. And a friend told me years ago to take off the cape. And I didn't know what she was talking about. She says, do me a favor, Sherry. And I said, what? She said, I need you to take off the cape. And I'm on time. I said, what are you talking about? She says, take it off, put it down, and slowly walk away. And she proceeded to tell me how unrealistic all the things were. And as women, especially, we have that push through mentality. We got to get it done. And if we don't do it, it won't get done, or it won't get done right. And there's a little bit of control, but we think is out of necessity because we feel that it must be done. So for me, that Superwoman syndrome is detrimental. And not only is it then, at one point I had a clinical practice. I had 26 employees. I was doing inpatient, outpatient. I was running. And, it never dawned on me that my blood pressure was going up. My weight was going up. And I would like to say, that's why I'm my size now, but I can't say that. But, it's a lot of things was happening because the physical will start deteriorating. And so we have to realize that we are human. We're not superwomen. And you have to learn to say no. And that's a big one for most of us, learning to say no.
Can you give specifics on how you took your cape off? I mean, I feel like I have my cape on right now.
I sneak my cape back on all the time. I recognize when I'm doing too much. It's called self-care. It's really called self-care because what happens is we take on everybody's issues. We internalize them. It's not just we take them on, we internalize them because we're gonna fix them. And so what I had to do after my friend abruptly cut it off that day, and then I sneaked and patched it back together. I had to realize that it's not an option. If we don't do it, something's going to go wrong. And I will tell a very quick story and what happened to me during the pandemic. And I don't mind sharing this. I shared it once before, or several times before now. During the pandemic, everything was in a crisis and I was Superwoman. I mean, my cape was, in fact, my little smart, friend had me a cape made. And so, so I had my cape and I'm going everywhere. Trying to save everybody else is a lot of grief. It was a lot of sorrow. It was really, really hard initially. I don't have to everybody live through it. And in 2020, in the midst of everything, and I had a busy year, incredible year, I was going to skip my mammogram because I didn't have time. I didn't have time for certain things. I just didn't have time. And so with that being said, I said to myself, how we talk to ourselves? It's always okay. I don't need to do that. But my primary physician will not allow you to come for your annual visit unless you've had your mammogram. And I had an appointment for her and I thought I would have canceled that too. I'm fine. I'm saving the world. I'm my cape is fine. But I went to do the mammogram and I had a busy day that day. And I had said to myself, okay, I'm going to run in here. It should take about 20, 30 minutes. I get out and then and they told me, well, hold on. And I looked at them like, are you crazy? What do you need? Did I not give you my insurance? What you need? Lo and behold, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in November 2020. I had surgery. My husband's a medical doctor, and I've never seen things go this fast. But on a Thursday, that next day, on Friday, I was in to see an oncologist. On Monday, I was in to see the surgeon. Then the second day, and we don't know what to ask for as women. Sometimes we don't know what we need. And a lot of my asking is, I'm the middle child, but also my asking is I've worked with women so many times to have questions to ask. And I asked some questions and they say, oh yeah, we can even do a boob job while we're doing. You can do a boob job. Okay. But I had timed it in my mind because thank goodness I'm cancer free. Thank goodness that we're So I had surgery. That was at the end of, I found out at the end of November, December 10th, I had the surgery. I was planning my comeback for the first of the year. And I said, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm doing great. Everything is going well. And I had my, if anybody ever come to my office, Johnny runs my office. And Johnny says, I blocked you off until at least February. I said, I don't know why. It's just surgery. I'm good now. I had to go through radiation. I didn't account for any of that. So the question is, after a while, you realize it's self-care, and you always, and I'm going to suggest everybody, men, women, always have one honest friend that will tell you like it is. And will tell you very clearly and keep you grounded. Not the one that cut off the cape, because I have more than one. At least 2 or 3. But she said to me I was doing well, and I'm very grateful for that. By April, I started having pains in my boobs. And I thought, well, what is this pain? My husband said, well, that's nerve endings, trying to come and regenerate. And I'm thinking, why? I've gone through all this other stuff, but I forgot I was taking pain medication too. And so I hadn't heard. All of a sudden, my dear friend looks at me, who is a psychologist, and she said to me, Sherry, you do realize what you've been through, don't you? Sometimes we have to get others from the outside to make us realize we got to take the cape off. And it was at that point that self-care really kicked in for me, because it's not an option. And it was at that point that it dawned on me why a lady from my husband's office had sent me some little cancer hat, and she sent me little booties for Christmas. And I had looked at my husband and said, why is she sending me that? It didn't dawn on me that we get so busy, what's happening to us. So yes, we have to have true and honest people to help us take that cape off.
Thank you. And thank you. I'm grateful that you're okay.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. So I'm a type A personality. And my sister was too. When my dad died, my sister was 8.5 years old. So she often would tell people, I grew up at the age of 9 because my mom leaned on her. My mom worked 2 jobs, and my grandma pitched in, to care for us and raise my sister and my brother and I. But essentially, my sister was like a second mom to me. So I saw her be that quote unquote superwoman, put herself through college, paid her way through Georgia State, put herself through counseling so she could finally get over the trauma of my dad's suicide, which happened in her room, just so much. And she went on to become a CPA and was the highest ranking Black person at Arthur Anderson in Houston consulting. And then she had a great marriage, 3 kids. One of her children suffers with bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder. And then she changed her career to save her child. She put everybody else first. When I say everybody, I mean everybody came before her. And she died 3 years ago unexpectedly. Still really hard, but God is good. I'm getting through it one day at a time. But to say she was close to me is an understatement, but I just saw how she was in that role of superwoman for everyone else. And I emulated her as best as I could. I tried to be everything to everybody in the entertainment industry. Anybody that knew me, know I went really hard for my artists. It was never about me. It was always about the artists and the companies that I worked for. And as a result, I drove myself into being sick, and that's why I walked away from my career. But I have a little bit of a different approach now with the cape, because we are still hashtag Black Girl Magic or women rock, no matter what nationality you are, right? And women, we do so much for our families, right? We're the caregivers, we're the nurturers. We got to support our spouses and partners, and then try to take care of us, got to cook dinner, although some, men and partners are cooking more now, but you get it, right? You understand the gist of it. But I like being that woman. Tanya will tell you, I did everything at Syracuse. I gave campus tours. I worked at the radio station. I try to live my life by humility, because I feel like I was just afforded some opportunities that others didn't, and God blessed me. But then I also was afforded some things that weren't so popular. And so I'll end by just saying, I look at the cape a little bit differently now because I still feel like, God gave me these opportunities for a reason. He put trust in me to be able to launch the careers of $1 million superstars and artists around the world, but now to be able to help people. So I'm looking at that cape, and my girlfriend Sherry was like, well, it's not just always about putting it down. So now I use my cape to put across my legs to take a nap when I'm tired. But sometimes if I'm going in those boardrooms trying to get some funding for Silence the Shame, I wear it as a turban. And I repurpose my cape is what I call it. It's repurposing your cape. And sometimes I'm cold and I'm having a bad day, like Monday was my sister's birthday, and I cried like a baby. So I use that cape to caress me and to comfort me. And sometimes I'll put that cape on the floor to draw a line in the sand, and that boundary, you better not overstep my boundary. Don't follow me. I'm not working as much, right? So it's about repurposing that cape. We are unapologetically awesome and fierce. And we've been through so much as women in this world, as women of color. Who is somebody to dim our light? So no, I'm gonna take my cape, but I'm gonna repurpose it when I need to. I'm gonna wear it and I'm gonna change it so it fits the mood that I'm in that day so that I can pour back into myself from a self-care perspective. Because if anybody knows, like, if I'm not having a good day, I'm gonna tell you, like Tanya said, I'm very honest about it. But I'm also honest with my body now, everything I've gone through. Like last year, I was really sick. I had to get my gallbladder removed. I lost my mom. I was the main caregiver in January. I've been through a lot, but so have you all. So have your family members. It don't make me that more special because I've been through so much. It is tough, but I take it one day at a time, right? And I'm taking that cape on the journey with me one day at a time.
So if you hear me say repurposing the cape, you know what cape.
Told me I don't have to take it off, but I came up with the repurpose.
Yes. Perfect. So how do we support each other to not suffer in silence? How do we help burden our community from the stigma of seeking support, mental health support?
I'll just quickly add, and then we'll let the expert speak. So I came up with this thing, like, because it's basketball season. Shout out to the Hawks who just started back. So I say, who's in your starting five? You can't start a basketball game until you have 5 players on the court. So you need to think about who's in your starting five from a wellness perspective, and be able to have those folks. Because we have to compartmentalize our friendships. Everybody, you can't travel with everybody. I got some girlfriends I love, but we cannot travel together. I have some male friends that I love, but we can't really talk about mental health and wellness. Some conversations are just tough. So if it's an auntie, if it's a sister, if it's a brother, husband, coach, your therapist, your life coach, whomever, get yourself at least 5 people that you can call and be honest with, right? And that can pour into you on a regular basis. Get a text thread going and start some support groups on your own. And then the other thing is we have to encourage one another. I like to visit Europe, although I know they didn't colonize the world. I think the architecture is beautiful and the landscape is beautiful. And I just love Europe. And so when I go, some of my European friends are like, oh, you Americans, you live to work. Here we, work to live. And so I try to encourage my girlfriends, take that vacation. We got, even with Silence the Shame now, we have 6 employees. God is good. But I tell, my staff members, don't let your mental health days roll over. Go ahead and take them. I realize that my love language for wellness, as I like to call it, is travel. Losing my sister and my mom have put me in places I can't even begin to describe. And it's not about me getting over their death. It's like finding pathways for it. So travel allows me to find pathways for it. So I took a sabbatical. I called it Eat, Pray, Live, because I'm single. But this past Memorial Day, I rented an Airbnb in London for 5.5 weeks and worked remotely by myself. Went to Barcelona by myself, but I'm encouraging my girlfriends to do it. So ways that inspire me, or even just taking a bath. I'm at that age, I'm in menopause. Who knew that Epsom salt could cure it all? So everything that I'm doing that's helping me, either I share on social media or I tell my friends in my friend circle, in my friend group. so that we can empower one another. And that's what I am at least appreciative out of the pandemic is I have all these little pockets of friendships that I formed in different text threads. And so you can't keep all that close to the vest, like, because, you know, we're living in some really tough times, whether it's climate change, the increased rate of suicide in our communities, still, you know, the objectification of women and men in certain cultures. It's so much. I feel like we're turning back the clock, and that's why y'all got to get out and vote on the 8th. But we have to be really intentional about what we do from a wellness perspective, and you got to share it with your tribe. Tanya and I talked about your tribe. Create your tribes of wellness and people that can pour back into you on a regular basis. And those folks that aren't on the same page, you don't have to be around them. It's okay to set those boundaries. You don't have to be their friends. Just pray for grace and mercy for them. And maybe prayers are the best you can really do for them at that time, but be protective of your space.
Dr. Sherry, can you also kind of share your final thoughts? We're wrapping up.
I say ditto to everything, to everything she said, because you have to have a safe space and some people that you can share. And it's okay not to be okay. One of the things we think we have to be okay all the time. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to have a bad day. And remember, and I love some of the things you're doing is self-care, because self-care is not a luxury. It's a necessity. And we got to understand it. And we do whatever we need to do to take care of ourselves, because if we don't take care of ourselves, we really are not doing any favors for anybody else, and we can't help anybody else. So, you know, I don't care what that looks like to you, discover it and do it. And do it on a consistent basis. It's not once a year I'm going to do self-care. I disconnected and went to Jamaica in August. It's like, I put it on Facebook. I said, what I said to myself, you know, somebody said, well, you know, maybe this is not the best time. Maybe you can't afford it, but you can't afford not to. And you can work from anywhere now. And so I didn't say that I had to work, but I did do a little work there. But the thing is, disconnect, put it down, walk away, and you'll be okay, because it's going to be right there for you when you come back.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. I want to leave you with a closing quote. It is a quote from Pablo Picasso, and it's I love it, though I had to tweak it. The meaning of life is finding your purpose, finding your gifts. The meaning of life is finding your gift. The purpose of life is giving it away. But I want to encourage all of us to remember to take care of our whole self as we live in our passion and give our gifts away. Thank you, ladies.